Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hammer Territory podcast presented by Fox One. I am Scott Coleman, and I am joined today by a man who needs no introduction because you know him very well. He is in your homes on the TV every single night. CJ Nitkowski, the fantastic Braves television analyst. CJ, I know that you, like so many people, were up till deep into the night on Monday watching a 6.5 hour World Series game. I know you are a coffee fan. I got to add, I mean, how many cups of coffee and shots of espresso are in your system to get you going today?
Well, first of all, Scott, thanks for having me, man. I really enjoy the work that you do, and I've said it many times. The blogging community, the podcast community with the Braves is unbelievable. It's a lot of really good talent and good information, and I watch a lot of it. So it's good to spend a lot of time, spend some time with you. I try not to go too late with the coffee. I do think I can drink it later than most. Like I will have it during games. And usually I would have climbed into bed in that game and probably had fallen asleep. I did that a couple of times this postseason. But I have a good friend of mine that I worked with when I was at FS1 who has a live podcast, asked me to come on post-game during the World Series with the Blue Jays being in it. He's up in Canada. And so I agreed. And I'm not going to say I regret it because he is a good friend, but that one was a tough one. I don't know if I would have made it otherwise, but it was wild, man. I mean, 6:39 is just insane when it comes to a baseball game and a postseason game. But I was up. I made it. My wife was really mad at me because our dog, when I sit on the couch and kind of watch games and stuff, and she goes to bed a little bit earlier, our dog takes my spot in the bed. And then when I'm ready to go to bed, I have to ask our dog to move. And as she gets a little bit older, she's been less likely wanting to move. And we had to get a little forceful with her yesterday. And then I woke my wife up, and then she was mad. So I blame the Dodgers and the Blue Jays for a lot of things that happened in my home that night.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, 18 innings, just an all-timer, historic. Happy for Freddie Freeman to get just another incredible moment on his now, I think, surefire first ballot Hall of Fame candidacy.
Good to see things are looking up for him. Yeah, finally going his way.
Right. Yeah. He's doing okay out there in LA. Well, CJ, we are going to have you talk some of the key pressing offseason storylines for the Braves. But before we get into that, you now have been in the Braves broadcast booth for 2 years now. I don't say it just because you're on the podcast, but you and Brandon Godden do such a great job in the booth. We are fortunate as fans to have you calling games every single night. And you, of course, before going to the broadcast booth, had a long career pitching in the majors. You also pitched in Japan and in Korea. And I wanted to ask, as you were pitching, was a broadcast job or life in the broadcast booth, was that something that was always kind of in the back of your mind as you were playing and thinking about life beyond baseball? Or was it one of those things where you woke up one morning and thought, maybe I want to try this out?
So I was always fascinated by the media and baseball. I'm kind of a one-trick pony when it comes to sports. I mean, I grew up with that early kind of Sports Center generation when things really started getting popular and highlight shows and those kinds of things. But listening to games, like so many others, is kind of what put me to bed at night. I was a kid who grew up in suburban New York, and so I was listening to Yankee games on the radio. And again, that's how I fell asleep every night, listening to AM radio. And so I was always fascinated by the media and the job that they did. And then as I got to play the game professionally, making my way around the league, I always became at least good friends, or at least got to know the local media. Always asking questions, always was interested in what they were doing, both on the writer's side. I made and still have good relationships with a lot of the writers that I played with that had some stops along the way. Not so much talking about, my career, but just getting to know them a little bit and developing those kinds of relationships. And then the same thing on the TV side. Now, every game wasn't on television when I first broke in 1995, but certainly local television had a heavy presence. The Braves and the Cubs in particular really established themselves as far as kind of the nationwide local feeds, if you will. And so I was very well aware of all of it and interested in it. I didn't know if I necessarily wanted it as a career. I just knew that I found it fascinating as far as what they did. So I was asked a lot of questions and started doing some work when I was still playing. The first thing I ever did was when I was in Detroit, 1999 to 2001. I would go on with Bob Valvano and serve as a postseason analyst for him. The Tigers were not a postseason team during those years. He asked me to come on. He thought maybe I'd have some insight. I was like, oh, sure, I'd love to do it. And so I did that for a couple of years and started to then kind of maybe get the idea that, this could be something that I'd be interested in post-career. So I was always intrigued by what everybody did in the media, both radio and TV, and then also even on the writing side for that matter. So it kind of sparked an interest going back to when I was a kid, but then getting to have a kind of a front row seat to what those folks do that really kind of intrigued me, and sort of realizing, yeah, this would be great if I could do this kind of post-career, but I didn't really know the path. I knew I was just interested in it.
Yeah. The rest is history, right? Now
Yeah.
you're called games with the Texas Rangers and now the Braves. And as I said, you and Brandon, man, you guys are A+. I listen to a lot of broadcasts, watch a lot of baseball, and we are fortunate to have you both in the booth. And one thing that you do, CJ, that I thought was like immediately apparent when you joined the booth was you bring a ton of data and analysis every single night. And even things that are just as fun and informative as like umpire scouting reports. I mean, I don't know if I'd ever really heard a TV booth talk about that before. And then, you're given a scouting report and you say, well, pretty tight zone, but if you open it up on the to lefties, he'll give you the outside corner. And lo and behold, 2 innings in, they're getting the outside corner against lefties. Is that part of kind of what you would do as a player when you were preparing for games and getting ready? Or is that something you've kind of picked up as you have spent some time in the media world?
So the data that is available now was not nearly as available when I played, but there was some, especially the back half of my career. We started seeing it a little bit more, but again, not nearly to the degree. Anything when it came to umpires, a lot of times was word of mouth. And guys would talk about, especially for starters that had a good feel that had been around. They may have some clues for you. Catcher, same thing. They may have some ideas for you. And what happens with an umpire, a lot of times we'd say, let an umpire establish his zone, maybe early on, get a feel for it, make sure you're paying attention, because if there's a tendency, you want to be able to take advantage of it one way or another, right? If a guy's big to a certain side of the plate, you'd want to know. If he's tight in other areas, don't get upset when he doesn't make that call, because that's kind of who he is. That was really useful information. But again, it wasn't to the degree of what's available now. I think when it comes to the data, for me, umpires specifically, kind of starting there, what I like to do is that anybody can tell you what has happened after it's happened, right? That's the easy thing to do, right? Either whether it's the second guess or just describe what you were seeing. What I hope to do is to kind of bring fans in and give them something to look at and give them something to track and say, hey, is this true? Because there will be times where an umpire has had a tendency through the last couple of years of his career, or even that year in particular, that all of a sudden doesn't show up one night, right? Just like players, like it happens with them as well. That
Sure.
we know a guy is, hey, this guy's really good against curveballs, and all of a sudden he has a bad day against curveballs that night. It's going to happen. So the thought process there is, yes, to kind of let you know what the history has been, but then also like come along for the ride. Let's see how it plays out, right? We know that generally for this certain umpire, right-handed pitchers, left-handed hitters, he's really tight in. Well, that's not great for our guy because he throws a cutter and he likes to throw that cutter into lefties. How's that going to play out tonight? So that's a big part of it, is to try to bring people along, not just to tell you what I know, but to hopefully keep you intrigued. And then, of course, when I have it wrong or the tendency's not there that night, you can be like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But I do think when I listen now for people that will share some umpire data, sometimes I feel like they are guessing, or they're saying some things that they've heard or they kind of know, and it's not necessarily data backed. Which you can take some chances, and there are some things you can get away with in what we do, but I just prefer to have something to back it up. And so what I do is I'll take that scouting report, that heat map, I'll send it to our producer, Gretchen Caney, and then she'll kind of turn into a very quick, almost kind of copy and paste graphic, just so you can see it. And if we feel like we need to get more detailed, we will, right? Sometimes we'll just show you the one. Sometimes we'll show you left versus right, if there's really a big difference in what that umpire does in those situations. So I like to use it to bring people along. And to have something to back up. I do have to be a little bit careful sometimes in getting too data heavy. Right? There's a balance in there I think we all try to find, and you're never going to nail it perfectly. You don't want to leave anybody behind that's not interested, but you also don't want to leave the new age fan out in the cold either, who is very interested and very hungry in data. So there is a balance that we're always working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's fascinating to hear. And, it's really an interesting way to present the game. And you said finding the balance, because I think if you get too data heavy, it can be overwhelming. And if it's so basic and elementary, then, you feel like with modern way the game is played in modern times, like, wait a minute, there are more advanced stats than, what's a guy hitting, his batting average, or, it's fascinating to see the way baseball has evolved over the last 10 or 20 years.
The big one for me real quick was on Strider this year. Right, is trying to best explain what's going on with his fastball, again, without it being like, okay, induced vertical break is a super boring phrase to use during a game. How can we tighten that up the best we can to let you know, sure, his velocity's down a couple miles an hour, but that didn't concern me, is that he wasn't getting that same kind of ride on his heater. And we knew that existed during my career. We just didn't have a number for it. We joke around about a guy who had an invisible fastball, or this guy's got some good giddy up on his fastball, or it disappears on you. Those kinds of phrases that we would use. Well, now there's a number to really back it up. And Spencer's talked about it. He is about as bright as any pitcher I've ever heard talk about pitching, certainly in this age. And he was aware of kind of that induced vertical break. But how do we bring that to, your 80-year-old Braves fan who's been listening to games forever is like, don't give me all that fancy talk. Just kind of let me know what's going on, right? So trying to find that balance is always a challenge. But he was a good example of what was going on with his fastball this year, with that induced vertical break kind of being down. And yeah, sure, the velocity was, but he would tell you all day long he'll take the break over the velo whenever he could, because that's going to be a better fastball.
Yeah, I am so fascinated to see what Spencer Strider is going to do. Tinkering.
Same.
I mean, he is a psycho in the most positive way possible, and
Yeah.
he's a madman out there, and very excited to see. We'll talk about Strider a little bit later in the show when we talk about the pitching staff. And CJ, I wanted to ask one final kind of non-Braves question, and I always like asking this question to people who have been around the league. Do you have a favorite ballpark to call a game in, and then 2, is there maybe an under the radar park that you really like calling games from? And I'll give you a half second to think about it. I think if you asked a fan who's been around to a few stadiums, of course, Pittsburgh always comes up. San Francisco has the amazing views. Petco Park, it's 75 degrees every day. Like, so your favorite park or multiple parks to call a game from, and then maybe one under the radar that fans wouldn't always point to as a place that's really nice to watch a ball game?
Yeah, so there's a couple of really great booths, right? So now from this view, for me calling the game, the view kind of matters a little bit. That's a big part of it, right? So you may have a really small booth, but you're in a good spot. And you might be in a really big booth that's got all kinds of great amenities, but the view isn't great. Those kinds of things, I think, come into play now more than ever. You said one that I would put right near the top of my list, and that is San Francisco. There's something about that booth that is just cozy. It's got kind of lower ceilings, which I don't know why, but there's something about when you're standing in it, it just feels really comfortable. And then sitting in it, you have a great view of the ballpark. That is something that was always been kind of known to be important for the San Francisco Giants, understanding that your job as a broadcaster, both on television and radio, is to bring the game to life. They got to work a little bit harder to do that on radio, right? Because they're describing everything, and you need to be in it to really be able to describe it well. I think that's something that they take pretty seriously. So from that standpoint, that is one that I always feel like I feel good when I'm there, right? You feel like, oh, would you be a little tired body-wise because it's a 3-hour difference? It just feels good when you're in that booth. It's usually pretty good weather. It can get a little chilly at night, certainly, but you feel like you're kind of right in the crowd. The other one, and maybe some people would see it as an under-the-radar choice, but has a very similar kind of situation where you feel like you're right in it, in the middle of everything, is Baltimore. Baltimore has probably one of the best booths in the game, location-wise, just even the way it was set up. When I was doing games for the Rangers prior to them building Globe Life Field, our executive producer was asking us a very similar question, more so because what did they want to do to the booth? How did they want to build it out to make it a really good one? I said Baltimore probably from a technical standpoint, just the way the counter was set up, where your plugs are, where the holes are, little things you wouldn't think about, where the holes are in your desk for your cords to go in. There's some places where you go where it's right in the middle where you're sitting, where I'd be putting my computer. Well, that's not any good, because then, I get a little, I want things to be kind of neat and orderly. And now if my computer is sitting over the top of where that hole is, it's a little wobbly. The wires are in weird places. Dumb little things like that Baltimore does really well are important. But at the end of the day, it's about really seeing the game well, having a feel for the game that can then put you in the best position to bring it to life. A place like Pittsburgh, it's beautiful. John Sterling, I think, has the best line about that ballpark at PNC, and said it's an absolutely gorgeous view, just not of the game. Like, you could see downtown Pittsburgh, the ballpark's gorgeous, it's designed really well, but you are so high up that it is a little bit difficult to really have that feeling. So most of it is off the monitor, and you can still call a great game off the monitor, but there's something about trying to do both when you're in a spot where you can see things really well. And I would say both Baltimore and San Francisco on the visiting side are two of the best.
Awesome. Well, good to know. It's it's one of my truly favorite things about baseball is that every park is unique. It's different. Some parks are 100 years old. Some of them were built, 6 years ago or 7 years ago, like Truist is. It really does make a fun atmosphere if you bounce around and have the opportunity to see multiple stadiums.
Yeah, we tell people all the time, like, there's a lot of places where you got to put them on your bucket list, and there's some great ballparks. I throw Seattle in there as well. It's a little bit of a trip, but probably worth doing it at least one time.
Yeah, Absolutely. So plan out your trip. The Braves 2026 calendar is out and schedule is out. So if you want to plan some time, travel with the team, I highly recommend it. All right, we are now going to talk some key offseason storylines for the Braves with CJ. But first, a quick word from our partners.
Hey, if you want to take care of yourself, your body, and everything that goes into health, fitness, and nutrition, Superpower provides Kratz what I would call the pro experience for the everyday person.
100%. Super easy. You get your lab test results back and you can streamline exactly what you're deficient in. You can say, okay, this is what the results told me. I'm going to go ahead and maybe look for that in a supplement, which they provide. I'm going to go ahead and look at that in my daily workouts, which they give so many different ideas of how to make sure your deficiencies become some of your superpowers.
Superpower used to cost $499. Head to superpower.com right now to learn more and lock in the special $199 price while it lasts. After you sign up, they'll ask you how you heard about them and make sure you mention FT. Your biology decoded, your blueprint activated with Superpower.
Welcome back to the Hammer Territory podcast presented by Fox One. CJ, we're going to jump right in here because I think it's probably fair to say that shortstop is maybe the most pressing need for the Braves this offseason. Not the only need, but I think it is something that we all have circled on our list of to-do items. We're going to timestamp this. It's about 6:30 p.m. on Tuesday evening. So on the chance something were to break between now and when people are listening or watching. But you put out a couple of days ago on your Twitter account a Braves offseason wish list, and at shortstop, Ha-Seong Kim was the top name listed there. I don't know if that's necessarily breaking any news or shocking to people listening to the show, but what was it from Kim's month in Atlanta? I think Mark Bowman of MLB.com called it a $2 million recruiting visit for Kim to try to persuade him to stay here. What was it that he does well that you think make him a good candidate for this team, assuming they can work out some kind of contract with him?
Yeah, let's hope so, right? There's a player option there that we'd love to see him just exercise and kind of have that bounce back here before he hits free agency again after next season. A couple of things. One, first of all, there are very limited options as far as what's really available on the shortstop side. So you have a guy who's put your uniform on, who's been very clear about the fact that he's always wanted to play in Atlanta. It's been one of those places that he has been interested in. He's got a great relationship with Jurickson Profar, right? So there's that draw there of this is a place he'd like to be. This is a place where he would be really happy. There's a good Korean-American community here in Atlanta, and that's important to guys, right? If you can find that kind of community to make you a little bit more comfortable, we certainly have that. So from that standpoint, it seems like he would really enjoy it. And it seemed like he did. And we talked to his translator, David, and asked kind of questions as things were going along. And he said, yeah, he's been happy. He really likes it. And so you get excited about the possibility because we know how limited those options really are. The other part of it now from the baseball side, he's a good defender. Obviously, he's won a Gold Glove before. I think everybody will always look a half a step down when we watch Nick Allen all season long. Like, I couldn't believe how good he looked like. And I watched him in Oakland a decent amount when I was with the Rangers, and I knew he was a good player, a good defensive player, but he looked like he took it to another level this year. So anybody that comes in behind him is going to look a little bit less than just because he's that good defensively. But that little bit that you give up, you make up for in what you get offensively. And there were times where you could just feel the difference. And it's funny that we talk about being so analytical heavy, but there's also these feels to things throughout the game that I've seen over the course of my career. And there was a feel to the lineup that was a lot different when Ha-Seong Kim was in there, right? The opportunity to know that when a spot came up, he could drive the ball out of the ballpark if needed. He could give you a pretty good quality at bat and do some really good things. So I think, who he is as a player, the fact that he really liked it here, the fact that it's 1 year, not that I would be opposed to them figuring out a way to get something longer term done. That'd be great. And it's going to be hard because of his agent situation, obviously, but hopefully he will take that deal. It just everything about him seemed like a perfect fit. You got to want guys that want to be here. I know the Braves have done really well. We've seen those anonymous polls, right? Which place would you like to play the most? Atlanta usually comes near the top, if not the top of that list for a lot of players, and I'm not surprised by that. So you want to kind of use that hopefully to also persuade him to stay. But he just seems like the perfect fit based on what's available.
Yeah. And one thing that Ha-Seong Kim has done really his entire career is carry a high walk rate and get on base. And in my opinion, This offense is really humming and was at its best this past season and previous years when the bottom of the order was getting on base ahead of Acuna and Olsen and Riley and Profar and Baldwin. And that's maybe not rocket science, but adding some on base, which is something that Kim has done well, even if he's not a slugger who's going to go out there and hit 35 homers, or he's not necessarily someone who's going to go out there and carry a 300 batting average, as rare as that is in modern day baseball. But having players who can get on base to kind of feed the top of the lineup, to me, feels like something, if the Braves can do it, would really help this offense out next year.
100%, right? When they were historically good a couple of years ago, that was the story, right? It was one thing about the top and what they would do in those first couple of innings. It just seemed like they boat race teams. But you don't get that if you don't get production at the bottom. We have this conversation all the time on my radio show. There's good teams that you look out there, even the Dodgers this year, the Yankees for a while, that are top heavy. And you start to look at the bottom of their orders and they really struggle to get guys on base and to produce. And that's when you start to have your issues, to have a well-balanced lineup. You're right. It sounds really obvious, but it's very important. So if Michael's down there with a guy like Ha-Seong Kim and they're going right, and we'll see who knows how this offseason is going to play out, what the lineup looks like next year as far as order goes, but you can have some really impact players down there. The Braves have that opportunity because of how deep that they run. And you're right. It makes all the difference in the world. And it makes you also really think about where Ronald is best suited in the order, right? If you're getting production from the bottom, then sure, he can lead off. But I thought Fred McGriff brought up a good point earlier this year that Mark Bowman relayed to us, and that was, if Ronald's not going to steal right now, and we'll see what happens in the future, but based on the knees and being a little bit more cautious makes total sense. And the bottom of the order is a little bit weaker. It probably makes sense to have him bat second or third, give him some more opportunities to drive runs in. And I believe that to be true. Now, if you get that production back from near the bottom of the lineup, then you can put Ronald, I think, at the top of the order. You just don't want to waste, I think, the ability to drive more runs in from one of the best bats in the game. I know the Dodgers do it with Shohei Ohtani, but they even went through a period where they were kind of changing around and put Mookie in front of him to try to get him going. He didn't have his greatest year. There are different ways to do it. But when you have such a dynamic hitter like Ronald, he gives you all kinds of options. He's good in the leadoff spot if he's got some guys that are actually hitting in front of him. I think he gets even better.
Yeah. That is going to be, I hadn't really thought about that. That is going to be one of the first real decisions that the new Braves manager is going to have to make.
Yeah.
Like where to hit Acuna. Do you bat him lead off as he's done for so much? But it's a great point that McGriff made that, hey, if you don't have batters on, the solo homers are great, but how about some 3-run homers to really change a game with one swing, as we've seen Acuna be able to do. Another item on your offseason wish list for the Braves I thought was interesting was adding a right-handed bat of some kind to this order. Of course, the Braves at this moment are expected to lose Marcell Ozuna as DH as he hits free agency. We'll see. Maybe Marcell finds his way back. But, we've talked about on the show the interest in adding an outfielder to the mix who could both play outfield, could DH, just provide some more stability in this lineup. Of course, we know as incredible as Acuna is, he's had a fair share of injuries throughout his career. Profar can get an injury just like anyone else as well in left field. And even Michael Harris has had a couple of soft tissue problems over his career. So it was good to see, or I was encouraged to see that you had that as someone who's real close with the team, that you also feel like maybe another bat to this lineup would really help things out.
Yeah, so when we listened to Alex Anthopoulos kind of lay out the offseason, right, he didn't have it as his top priority, but he said, yeah, it's on the list. It's just down the list, right? The idea of a right-handed hitter. I think what becomes important is a righty that can handle lefties really well. And if you go look at the top 20 or so right-handed hitters and what they've done against left-handed pitching this last year, it's not a lot of guys that you can really get your hands on that would be available. That's why I put Seiya Suzuki as kind of a backup guy. He's got a year left on the list there. If you're not able to get Rob Refshiner, which I do think is going to be very tough to get him, but he's not. Still doesn't make him. He's still on the wish list for me because he fits it perfectly as far as what's available, what it would really cost you to get him. He's absolutely crushes lefties, and he had a great year in Boston, and they're probably going to sign him back. And he's a little bit older, but he does bring that to the table in a big way, and there's not a lot of options. So, again, Suzuki's another one. He's got a year left before he gets to free agency. Who knows how it's going to play out? But I think about the catching situation that all kind of ties in together for me, right? Where Sean Murphy's a really good defensive catcher. He's the better defensive catcher between him and Drake Baldwin. Baldwin did a really nice job this year. He obviously blew up on the scene. He came along defensively. I think he got better as he went. He could hold his own. It's not a knock on Drake at all. It's just that Murph is really, really good. If both of those guys are here next year, I know some speculation would Murph get traded. We'll see. I'd like to have them both. For me, Sean Murphy is probably catching 70 or so games, maybe a few more. Put Drake, then give him the rest of them. And then for me, he's got to be in the lineup almost every day, right? It's 150 times a year. That means that he is DHing the days that he's not catching. When he is catching, then I want a guy who can hit lefties, right? I think, want to make sure. Or if he's getting a day off. Or, Michael needs a day against a really tough lefty where you have some flexibility, right? Where a guy like Refsnyder or Suzuki can come in. You can put them in the outfield. You can slide Reynaldo over. You can slide Jurickson Profar over if you have to into center field. Just that kind of flexibility to me, I think is really important for the Braves to be able to have. Again, I know it's not near the top of the list for Alex Anthopoulos, starters, relievers, and then probably that right-handed hitter. But finding that kind of Adam Duvall type, they're just tough to come across these days. And obviously we saw the success that he had and what he's meant to this team in the past would be really nice to have. Where you go to get that at what level, that'll be the challenge. So even though I put Refsnyder at the top on my list, listen, there was guys on that, even going back to the shortstop situation with Seager and Pena, that may not even be available. But it's worth exploring for a couple of different reasons when I mentioned those guys. But in the case of Refsnyder, he's a free agent. And so I'd go after him pretty hard. I did get quite a response, by the way, on that from, as you may know, Rob Refsnyder was born in Korea, but he was raised here in the States. And I played in Korea for a couple of years. And a good friend of mine who was a scout for the Padres who actually signed Ha-Seong Kim and brought him over from Korea. He's like, hey, man, he's like, your wish list for the Braves it's made its rounds here in Korea. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, not just because of Ha-Seong Kim, but also because of Rob Refsnyder. Right? They claim him, of course, as one of theirs because he was born there. Yeah. So they're very proud of anybody that has Korean heritage that's playing in the States and say, that was not my intent. I'm not trying to make us Team Korea. I just think both of these guys would be great for the Braves.
Yeah. How funny. Yeah. University of Arizona legend, Robert Refsnyder. I'll get that plug in there. And hopefully as you talk about potentially adding an outfielder, somebody who can also DH on days, maybe when Baldwin is catching, I'm curious to see if Alex has any challenges recruiting like that kind of a bat. And because if you look at this roster, if everyone's healthy in the outfield, you have 3 outfielders who are going to be out there basically every day. Of course, everyone can use a breather. And then with DH, we'll see. It's fascinating, I think, assuming that both Murphy and Baldwin are on the roster. Are you in a situation where Sean Murphy might be sitting 4 days out of the week when he's not catching? I mean, that's all kind of part of the equation for the front office, but I'm hopeful that Alex is able to, one, add an impact bat of some kind, but also be able to sell it to that player of, hey, maybe some days you're a DH, some days you're in left field, some days you're in right field. If we get an injury, well, you're going to be wherever we have an injury every day, just to add some more depth and flexibility to this lineup, to give the Braves a chance, because God knows after the last 2 seasons, injuries are a virtual guarantee at this point.
Yeah, and we've heard Alex talk about how it seems like they're always looking to add outfielders over the course of the season, which we've seen now over the last couple of years. I think the sales pitch and kind of what you're talking about and convincing someone to take the role is easier than it's been in the past. And there are some guys that are not amenable to it, and those are guys that you probably were not going to bring into your clubhouse anyway. Money talks at the end of the day for free agents, but even if you were to acquire somebody via trade who maybe you're asking to change their role a little bit. That's where the communication of your new manager in the front office really come into play and getting buy-in, right? We use that phrase all the time, but it really is very important. We saw kind of what happened in the postseason, with Jazz Chisholm, not happy that he didn't play against the lefty. Those kinds of things can turn into a distraction. So they talk about it a lot here. It's been going on for decades, that making sure you're bringing in the right people into the clubhouse for exactly those kinds of reasons, that you find the right person that understands the role, that's open to the role, understands that this is about trying to win another ring, another championship here in Atlanta. In order to do that, this is how we see you fitting, and you got to get everybody on board.
One big puzzle, and hopefully they can find a couple of pieces that'll fit in really nicely and get this team back to the playoffs and contending for the World Series. And I mean, I miss watching the Braves in October. It's just, I mean, there's nothing like it.
Yeah, you're right. And listen, when I came over here, I was fortunate when this job opened up, and Frenchie really helped me kind of land things here. And I came over from the Rangers, who were bad for 6 years and then won a world championship. And I'm looking over and I'm seeing, the Braves just absolutely cruising. It just seemed like they're not going anywhere. I was very excited. The two things that, there's a lot of things, but the 2 guys that I was most looking forward to seeing every day were Ronald Acuna Jr. and Spencer Strider, right? Spencer was coming off his 20 wins, Ronald coming off his monster season. And both of those guys have been hurt quite a bit over the last couple of years. And I think it's affected the ability to either get to the postseason last year that they didn't, or the year before, the early exit of trying to have everybody healthy has been obviously a real challenge. So like you, I missed it too. I got to see just a quick exit, unfortunately, against the Padres 2 years ago. But this is a roster that is built to win now. Everybody knows it. It was one thing that I feel like when I noticed on the internet, and we got to be careful with who we read and who we listen to, but some folks talking about, trade Ronald and blow this thing up. I'm like, that is not even on the table. That's not even. There are times when a team comes out of a run like the Braves have been on that you will look at the roster and go, it might be time for some turnover. This is not that team. This is a team that, again, health is important for everybody. But healthy as they stand right now, they should be in the postseason. Certainly are going to add a little bit more here, build in some depth, maybe bring in some reinforcements, and they should be right back where they expect to be.
Yeah, let's hope. And if only we could, like in Madden, you click the button that turns off injuries to make sure all your players stay healthy, right? Maybe we can find that. We'll find that button for 2026 with the Braves. All right, we are going to go to one more quick break to hear a word from our partners, but after that, we are going to talk about this Braves pitching staff, the rotation, and the need for a closer. We'll be right back.
This episode of FT is brought to you by Huel. Cheers.
Cheers.
We got a new Huel edition here, the Daily Greens. I've got blueberry, lemon, and thyme. You've got?
I got myself peach and hibiscus. I love peach. This is delicious. Fuel for the go, man. And this is really good for your body. It's really good for your systems. Anything that has greens in it, especially from Huel, is pretty fantastic. This will get you going, a little energy, a little boost, and keep your insides feeling well too.
Yeah, developed by registered nutritionists and dietitians. Few vitamins, minerals, and superfoods. Only 25 calories, 4 grams of fiber, only 1 gram of sugar. That's the goods. Of course, we still love the Huel Black Edition. I got chocolate peanut butter. How you doing?
Strawberry banana is delicious.
Let's go. Huel makes healthy eating simple. They also just launched into Target stores nationwide. Try both products today with 15% off your purchase for new customers with the exclusive code FOUL at Huel.com/foul. Use that code and fill out the post-checkout survey to help support the show.
Welcome back to the Hammer Territory podcast presented by Fox One. CJ, in that offseason wish list for the starting rotation, you listed a couple of really talented starting pitchers, and I was like nodding along as I saw them because I would love to add an impact starter of some kind this offseason. You mentioned Ranger Suarez, Dylan Cease, who are both pending free agents, as well as Sonny Gray, who we've talked about on the show a bit, who is approaching his final years with the St. Louis Cardinals, who are probably going into a rebuild. You mentioned it. We don't need to talk for 20 minutes why those three pitchers would do wonders for this pitching staff. But to me, the two consistencies across the board with those three arms, they're all good, but they're also remarkably durable throughout their careers, and adding, at least in my opinion, adding some durability to this rotation as much as you can with pitchers who pitchers get hurt all the time. But to me, those three guys really stood out as pitchers who go out there every 5 days and throw the ball.
Yep, I'm with you. And it also gets Ranger Suarez off the Phillies and not pitching against the Braves, right? So there's already a net plus there. I really like him. I like the way that he carries himself. I like the way that he attacks. I like the way that when you see him in big spots, he never looks overwhelmed. There's something to him. There's a little bit of an edge to Ranger Suarez. He's going to be very expensive. We know that. And there's going to be a lot of teams that are in on him as a free agent. But to me, I tried to be, it's interesting when I put that list together, part of me was like trying to be realistic. And then there was a couple of kind of also even with the backup guys, maybe a long shot, but I'd love to have him in a Braves uniform. Ranger Suarez will be tough to acquire. There's no two ways about it. But if they're going big on a starting pitcher, there's not a lot of big ones that are out there in free agency. I like him over Framber Valdez. He's the other one. Framber's got a great arm, certainly, and may do very well over what likely is going to be a pretty big contract for him. But there's a little bit more of an emotional component to him. It can get away from him sometimes. And again, if he's a Brave, great. I'll take him all day long. But I like Ranger Suarez a little bit better. Sonny Gray, I got to be careful. I think we all do this in this game. If you trade stocks, sometimes we do this as well, is that you chase something that you really have wanted for a long time, or you want it to be successful in your uniform. And
I am very guilty of this, CJ. I've been talking about Sonny Gray on this show for 5-6 years now.
Exactly. So that's the part, and you're like, you feel like he's, comes up in Braves country, it just seems like such a perfect fit. I think that's why I had him on that list. So, and again, he's been durable, and I know he's a little bit older, and you have to trade to get him, and you got to try to make that work. And Chaim Bloom is probably not an easy guy to trade with, who's running the Cardinals now. He's always been a little bit reluctant to give up guys. Not saying it can't be done, but there's just always been something about him. I think obviously we're both in agreement on that. He just has always felt like a Brave. I know we got to be a little bit more analytical than that, but I've always liked him, and he can still pitch. And there's something about him in this uniform I think that would be fantastic. Dylan Cease coming home, right? He's a Milton kid down the street from where I'm at right now. That'd be a really nice add as well. He is also going to be very expensive. It's going to be an interesting time. Remember, the trade market for starting pitchers at the deadline last year was brutal. Like the prices were so high that we just did not see very much movement at all. And so that could also be an issue potentially this winter. We'll see. But hopefully it seems like Alex was pretty clear about that being a priority. I think, again, I look at our rotation, I look at everybody on paper and say, again, if health, this is a good group. But you look at the Dodgers, I use them as an example, not just because of the money that they spent, but if you go back to when Andrew Friedman first took over the Los Angeles Dodgers, they actually fell short on starting pitching. Now, there was a lot of changes with contracts and things, but they ran out essentially starting pitching. They did not have the depth that they needed to advance. And I've always felt like, this is my own little theory, that after that first year, and Andrew Friedman's a great executive and has been around for a long time, that he almost committed to himself that will never happen again. And now they're so incredibly deep. I was talking to Eric Karros the other day, who covers the Dodgers, longtime big leaguer, does television with them. And he said, man, I got to spring training. There was like 11 really good starters here, right? I mean, that's a big number. But look where they are now, to the point where they're putting starters in the bullpen and good ones, right? Emmett Sheehan, who's in the bullpen. I know Clayton Kershaw wasn't going to make starts where he's at right now, but he's in the bullpen helping out right now. Roki Sasaki is in the bullpen. And none of those guys pitched all year long, right? That's the other part if you look at their innings. So it's an interesting plan. Now, to try to get that many good starters is very tough to do. Even the Dodgers have had a hard time keeping people healthy. But there's something to that. Remember, last year when they won the World Series, they were very short on starting pitching and had bullpen games in the postseason. This year, it's the opposite, where they're incredibly deep. So I could see why Alex has kind of maybe looked at what they're doing. Not that he didn't know this already, but say, you know what? Yeah, we got a pretty good rotation on paper, but we got to be deeper. And so the idea of at least adding one or two does make sense.
Yeah. There is no such thing as too much starting pitching.
That's right.
Guaranteed. You and Brandon, and it could be June, July, August, will never start a broadcast and go, we have too many guys throwing the ball too well, and we don't know what to do with all these starting pitchers. There's nowhere to put them. The Braves are in. That is the biggest non-problem in the world. Go out and add every arm you can. Two of those pitchers I wanted to get your opinion on, I think because of the versatility they could bring, is Reynaldo Lopez, who, of course, missed just about the entirety of the past season, as well as Grant Holmes, who was pitching and throwing the ball really well until he needed to miss the remainder of the year. To me, those two feel like they have a lot of versatility. Of course, both have pitched in the bullpen at various times. Reynaldo Lopez was a terrific reliever for some time before coming to the Braves and turning into a starter 2 years ago. But those two, in my mind, assuming they're healthy, feel like they might be wild cards for this team's pitching staff next year.
I would agree. Grant Holmes, it's a really important offseason, and then we'll see where he is in spring training, right? Opting not to have the surgery. How is he going to feel? Avoiding, hopefully, any kind of major surgery is going to be big. You're right. He can do both. He's kind of a lunch pail guy in the sense that he's just there to show up for work, and whatever you want him to do, he's going to do. And he's going to do it well. I mean, he's been such a great story here for the Braves in the 10 years that it took him to get to the big leagues after being a first-round pick for the Dodgers is something to be admired. The way that he was able to stick with it and to get himself to this point where not even that he just got to the big leagues, but he's been impactful. He is an impactful arm. He's fun to watch. He's an easy guy to root for. As long as he comes into spring training and feeling healthy, you're absolutely right. You got a pretty good swing man there. I do wonder, we have this conversation a lot. What's better for your health? To be in the bullpen or to be in the rotation and maybe making a start every 6 days. We'll see where the depth is and where he is, but he's a really good swingman to have. Reynaldo is fascinating because I remember when they signed him and they say, he's like, I want to start. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool, but you're a really good reliever. So sure, they'll give you a shot in spring training, but pretty sure you're going to be in the bullpen. And then he goes out and he has a great first year. And he was unbelievably consistent back in the rotation. And you could see why he would want to be there. It seems like he maybe has backed off the idea of, wanting to do what he wants to do and understands that he missed the entire year. How do you best fit on this team next year? He could be another really good either swingman or just an impactful reliever, right? If he were to say, go out and try to make 25 starts and give you around 5 innings is what we saw every time from him after missing a whole year, might be a little bit of a bigger challenge. But what about 65 games and if you're only using him, say, inning at a time, like being careful with him, right? Because we know he kind of rediscovered that fastball a little bit when he went back into the bullpen a couple of years ago, and then that translated into a really good fastball as a starter, right? We saw him, he could reach back. He understood when to do it without overthrowing, without seeming like it was max effort, but all of a sudden there was 2 or 3 more miles an hour on a heater. That's something he picked up on, as a lot of guys do that go from the bullpen back into the rotation. So he knows how to do it. It's a matter of health for him, and then what the rest of the rotation potentially looks like, right, for the Braves. That'll be a big one. But there's a part of me that feels like he would be in the pen, but it's really too early to guess at this point because, again, you don't know what's going to pop up. He prepares to be a starter. That's what his offseason should look like, both of those guys coming into spring training in their mind, I'm going to make 30 starts for this team. And you can always back off. It's just a lot harder to push forward.
Well, and that's a perfect transition into kind of the last thing we wanted to talk with you today about, CJ, is the bullpen. And as we sit here today, Raisel Iglesias is a pending free agent. Other than the hiccup for the first 2 months of this past season, Raisel has been absolutely nails since that trade. And even in the second half, I mean, he was as good as anybody in that 9th inning role. He refound himself and was really, really good. And so pending free agent with Iglesias, and Joe Jimenez, of course, misses the entirety of the 25 season. He is throwing, but the serious knee injuries are scary to come back from, and it's going to be close to 18 months by the time he fires a competitive pitch in the spring from when he was last throwing in big league games. The bullpen, I think, is another question for this team. Who's going to be in the 9th inning? Could they use a Lopez or a Holmes to kind of bridge the gap in the 7th and 8th innings? This also, the bullpen feels like a puzzle, and we'll kind of see what Alex Anthopoulos ultimately decides to do.
It'll be a puzzle this winter. It'll be a puzzle during the season, very likely, right? Yeah, it's nice to have the lockdown closer if you can find it. It's going to be difficult to do. I know Ryan Helsley really struggled as a Met. He was going to be one of the better kind of closers that would have been available. I mentioned Emilio Pagan. I want to put together kind of that wish list. An older guy, but he's been good. You go look at his numbers, and he has really been a guy that later in his career he's been better. I'm okay bringing Raisel back too. I know it's interesting that you start to look at how he's kind of been historically somewhat of a slow starter. Where his velocity was over those last 4 months of the season. Kind of ironing out the slider issues, right? The slider at the beginning of the year was a big part of the problem. Most home runs that we saw, it just wasn't the same pitch, and it's his 3rd pitch, right? He was getting beat on it probably too many times. He still had the great changeup. It just seemed like you couldn't make a mistake, and they were capitalizing on it. He is as unselfish as anybody I've ever been around when it comes to a bullpen. What do you want me to do? You need me in the 5th because I'm struggling? I got you. You need me to be an opener? I got you. You want me to close? I got you. Some closers can't do that, and they're scared to do it. They're scared to get out of that comfort of, I get the last inning with a 3-run lead. That's when I'm in the game. 3 runs or less, and it's a save situation. There's something to be admired about that part with Raisel Iglesias. Everyone knows him here. There's that familiarity that you like as well. It's just a matter of trying to figure out what has kind of been the issue, especially last year, that he got off to the slow start, and then he is as good as anybody in the game. Probably the last 4 months of the season. So that's something that you'd want to iron out. But it should be hopefully multiple guys. You mentioned Joe Jimenez. I don't know if anybody was missed more in that bullpen last year than Joe Jimenez. With AJ getting hurt, AJ Minter getting hurt, maybe you feel like you didn't miss him as much, but he certainly was missed as well. Really excited about Tyler Kinley and what we saw, right? I know there was some criticism there, at least, again, careful who we listen to, but I know Braves fans are like, what? This is our move at the deadline. And there was a pretty big option for next year, and I think it even bumped up more because of some incentives that were hit. He was great, and his slider was really good. And listening to him talk about how he manipulates it, that's a weapon. Like, he really came on in a big way. I know Pierce Johnson had a good year. It was a couple bumps on the road toward the end, but he's still really good. He still spins it as good as anybody. What will be interesting to me to watch is Aaron Bummer under a different manager. It's not to say that didn't handle him well, but I do wonder about Bummer because he was good. I think he doesn't get the credit that he deserves. You got to really dig in sometimes on the numbers. Yeah, there's gonna be some walks here and there, but he is an elite level ground ball, heavy sinker guy, good sweeper. I know the command every once in a while will get away and he'll hit a guy here and there, but I really like him and what he can bring to the table. I think you strengthen up the rest of that bullpen, and he can be really impactful as well. So some good things happening last year. Obviously, Dylan Lee had the huge season, a couple home runs that got away from him late, so that number kind of ticked up on him. But there's good arms down there. They certainly do need to add. It will be a priority, but a couple of pieces, and all of a sudden you're talking about a really dynamic bullpen. The question just becomes, can you find that closer? Who knows? And we'll see who they bring in as a manager. But if you bring in, say, a younger, more analytic type of guy, maybe you don't open the season with a closer. You don't want to force it. If you can't get the guy you want, you don't want to force it. Can you play matchups? And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with your potential right-handed hitting kind of outfielder DH guy. Just getting everybody on board. There are some bullpens that they get everybody on board, and they don't know who's going to close that night, but they're good with it. And I think that probably could end up being I say that. I don't want to say it could be the case, but it's a backup plan. It could be a good one if you have to.
Sure. It feels like it's one of those things, bullpens and the pecking order, it just kind of works itself out over the course of a season. And sure, maybe you have just an absolute locked in ninth inning closer who's, if he's healthy, he's going to get you 40, 50 saves that year. But, that's the beauty of bullpens, and guys have good years, guys have bad years. And like you said earlier, even a 6-week stretch with Raisel, who's had a decade-long career being an elite reliever, his slider gets away from him for 6 weeks, and all of a sudden he lost his chop for a little bit there. And then you blink, and all of a sudden Raisel was back to being the good, really reliable ninth inning arm that he was really since he came over with the Braves.
Yeah, I'm glad nobody traded for him. I know we listened to Alex and talking about, I think some people missed, as we were making our way around the league leading into the deadline, ran across some people from other teams that I knew and some executives, and they were kind of asking. I'm like, listen, man, this guy's dealing right now. If you're interested, dig in a little bit, look at what he's done lately. At that point, it'd probably been like the last few weeks leading into the trade deadline. Look what happened earlier, the corrections that were made. He's back to where he was a year ago, but the offers never came. You can't force it, and that's fine by us too. We know how much he likes it here. So if that helps bring him back next year, even better.
Yeah. All in. I'll speak for myself. All in. If the Braves want to bring Raisel back for another season or multiple seasons, sign me up. Would happily have him back in that bullpen. Last question for you, CJ. I know you stay very busy during the regular season, and you stay busy in the off season you do radio for MLB Network, and you have a great Twitter following, and you're always talking about something and throwing out. I saw you talking about the 9-game World Series, bringing that back, and the ghost runner in extra innings. And
oh my goodness, that one. I had a lot of hate come my way for that one. A lot of times I'm throwing out ideas or thoughts that I have at the moment. It was 1:30 in the morning. A game was I'm like, oh my gosh, with this game. I'm like, you know what? Maybe the runner at second base, the way I'm thinking about it. And probably people say, what about like 12th inning on? I could get on board. Like, we'll see how the rest of the World Series goes. Yeah. Those bullpens are a mess right now. And you just started 3 straight games. You got 3, 4, 5 with no off days. And we played 18 innings. And I get it. It's good for you if you live on the West Coast. Like, you're in a good spot. You're not up to, it's 11, 45 when that game's over. For the rest of us, it was 2:45. I didn't get to bed till after 3. I don't know if it's best for our game. I don't know if it's best for all of our fans. But man, there were some people that were not happy. They said some really mean things to me about that. I'm just, I do like to start. Yeah. And I do like to sometimes start the conversation or have a little bit of fun, because I do love watching the postseason. That's why I'm saying, I was like, man, I don't like when the postseason's over, right? It gets us closer to spring training, but I'm like, I'd be okay with the best of 9, but not if we're playing 18 innings.
Sure. Yeah. That was a bizarre game 3, man. That was a game I'll remember forever. And, yeah. And imagine that, people on Twitter with their torches and pitchforks coming after.
Terrible things they said to me. Even some Braves fans said some mean things to me.
I know. It was, maybe it was late. Everyone was delirious. It was, 2 a.m. on the East Coast. I don't know. But all right, folks. Well, I'm going to let CJ go. He is a very busy man, as we have said. Of course, you can find all of CJ's great work, MLB Network Radio, and of course, whenever the season rolls around, rocking and rolling in that booth with Brandon. Again, just such a great broadcast booth, a great dynamic that you guys have bringing the games. And CJ, I hope that you were able to get away from baseball for at least a little bit this offseason, take some time, maybe a nice vacation, just kind of recharge the batteries, because I feel like spring training will be here before we know it.
I feel like spring training does charge the batteries. If anything, I feel like they get depleted in the offseason. But Scott, I appreciate you having me, man. Love the work that you do, and look forward to following this offseason, what happens for the Braves.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, as always, we'll be back with more shows on the Hammer Territory podcast this upcoming week. Of course, if the Braves ever hire a manager, we will be back to respond to that in emergency fashion. And then, of course, the offseason could get started officially in a couple of days from now, depending on what happens with the World Series. One more time, a big thank you to CJ for joining the show today. I am Scott Coleman. We will see everybody next time.